Peace and Black Power family. It's brother IJ time, but let me turn this volume down very quickly, family. Pardon me. Or maybe we could turn it off. Would you be able to turn that off? I can't get to it. So, welcome back to another episode of Harlem Liberation School on YouTube, family. You know, our organization, we try to help Black people do three things. That's wake up, clean up, and stand up. Wake up means develop consciousness of who you are, where you come from, to be self-aware. Clean up means to be self-corrective, to change the things about ourselves that are undesirable or that get in our way of success and advancement. And stand up means to do those things in a self-actualized way, to start the business, start the organization, get involved in the community or whatever. Today, we are very, very pleased to have a very important guest with a very important topic, very relevant topic. Family, I'm 56 years old. I remember my mother, but particularly my father, nagging me to death. Did you fill out that college application? Every other week, every other day, nagging me to death. Back in 1981, 82, it was almost like if you don't go to college, you are finished. You're going to have a loser life almost. That's the way our community sold it. And we understand that because during enslavement, we were prohibited from education. Education became a tool and a weapon for us. So it's understandable that many of our parents pushed college. However, you might also remember yourself, or maybe you have a child. You're bringing up college and they're like, college isn't on their radar. And maybe sometimes some of our students are failing in college, not excited by college, not motivated. Might be because that's not their particular thing. It's not for everyone. And today we're going to talk about a lot of careers and job choices you can make that don't require a 4-year degree. And to do that, we have our sister, Lawrese Brown. Peace, sister. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Ajay. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have.
And I'm glad that you're here with us. You know, it's funny, family. You meet people in all types of places. I'm not going to get into it at length, but Sister Lawrese used to be involved in an organization I worked for when as a classroom teacher. She was more in an administrative role. And we never physically met. It was all through Zooms, virtual stuff, right? But then I found out that she's on social media and she had a book and she had a whole career kind of outside what she was doing in this particular organization. Mm-hmm. And so I said, we got to bring this sister on because this topic is of great relevance. Sometimes we're pushing something on our youth, on adults that they don't want. They may not want to go to college. They may have other ambitions that don't require that. Sister Lawrese, first I want to ask you, how did you, let me put up the topic so people can see what we're talking about. Let me say this. For many of our parents, college education is a must. You know, it's pushed. It's like you got to breathe, you got to eat, and you got to go to college. Why do you think that is? And what would you say to those parents?
So you said something important, especially historically when we talk about slavery. So I read the book Pillars of the Republic, and I encourage everyone to read that. And historically, you know, Black people, education, literacy, even being able to read was something literally that was codified. We could not do. And so there's that understanding of the importance of reading and access to education as a means to free your mind and as a means to develop yourself. There's also this recognition that for us, when we were able to start to participate in schools and we had our own schools, later on, we would see this, Bell Hooks talks about this. It was this cultural piece before integration. It was like, that's where we were able to talk about our history and some of our heroes. But historically, education, especially for Black people in America, was always something we know was denied for us, but we aspired to because we saw it as a chance to prove in some capacity our respectability, but in other capacities that we were there was intellectual parity, right? That we're competent. We are just as competent and capable as white people. And Ajay, to go back to the story you tell just really briefly about your parents in 1981, the reason I wrote this book, and I know I'm jumping ahead here, is because education has always been about economic outputs, except unless you've been incredibly wealthy, that it was something you did just as like, I'm going to continue to finish my education. Of course, the case is also there that with the GI Bill, right, it became a little bit more about expanding it and economic outcomes. But education is closely tied to economics. And that's the conversation that I'm excited for us to have today. So in 1981, when your father was telling you have to go to college, he was talking about the economy has shifted fundamentally for all Americans. So we were no longer an agrarian culture. We already know that from the Industrial Revolution, but we also were manufacturing was on the decline. A lot of those good jobs that didn't require a four-year college degree, people didn't have access to. And so what your father was saying, especially in the 80s and 90s, it was like, listen, we are the service economy. And that's the shift. And that's where the narrative in a blanketed way came from. Just get the degree, right? That's what your father was telling you. Like, he was a pioneer in understanding the economy has shifted. You must get the degree. What we're talking about today is that was 1980. It was different in 1990. It was even different. I mean, we started to see the wobble in 2008. This is 2024. You help people come to consciousness. We have to awake to the type of economy we are in now, to labor economics, to supply and demand, to existential changes to industries like AI. And this is the conversation that I'm trying to have in the book, or at least get us to understand when it comes to education. Take a step back from the respectability. Take a step back from the belief that the four-year college degree is a safety, and understand we are in the time where education is most critical for participating in the economy. And what does that mean for us, especially as a group?
Yes. Now, you actually anticipated this question and you kind of answered it. For those who just came in, I want to reiterate this, that the education is relative, right? People get it for different reasons. You're saying that a lot of times people who are poor and oppressed, they tie it to status, to being to vindicating themselves. The others were not stupid or were not incorrigible. But you're saying it's always tied to economics. And clearly there's a shift between when I was a young man getting ready to go to college versus now. And I just want to make sure I understand, when we say what has changed in the last 30, 40 years, it accounts for the shift maybe in the importance of a college education. Are you saying that the industrial, that whole piece, like you could get a job? I think you said something about a certain skill set had waned. Could you reiterate that?
The economy. So I want to start this historically. Even historically, if you read in Pillars of the Republic, and they talk about how our schooling came about, and it was really informal, and it was truly because as a nation, we needed people to read the Bible. And so informally, a lot of education happened with parenting. Again, we were stopped from being able to read, but foundationally, it was like, we need people to read. And that happens at home. And then we started to move more towards barn houses, where people, that's where and women, it was really informalized. But in Pillars of the Republic, what they say is that, Black people, we would get educated. And then we would even go to abolitionists and we would say, well, what good is being educated if my fellow white man doesn't want to work with me and give me a job? And so I do want us to fundamentally understand that it was as Black people, and we still carry this narrative. And that's why sometimes we're the most resistant to stepping back from the degree, even with economic data, is because for us, it has historically been our narrative around, I have proved my equality to you. I have proved my intellectual capacity to you. I have proved that I should not be discriminated against and I should be able to work alongside my white counterparts because look, I got the degree. Now we'll get into later, right? Why that's a damaging belief. Because listen, ideally we do want to believe that education is a great equalizer. I think Brown versus Board Education put that in our mind. But economically, again, I'm going to keep coming to that. The outcomes between Black college graduates and white college graduates, it's not there. And so we have to awaken to realities. And that doesn't mean we can't be successful, but we have to be more strategic. So going back to what you said, right? It's always this recognition. Sure, education does, even without economics, it gives you opportunity. You need to be able to read. You need to be able to articulate your ideas. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to advocate and vote, and even understanding at a higher level what people are talking about. But what your father was talking about to you specifically in the 80s is that America was transitioning out of this manufacturing economy that was on the decline. we were becoming more of a service-based economy. And it's like when people are like, we moved all our jobs out, right? That's the most fun, like instinctive way we talk about it. They outsourced all the jobs. Yeah. We used to make a lot more made in the USA. Things started to become outsourced. So the economy was like, wait a minute. And it's also, Ajay, if any of your listeners, if they went to school and they were like, we had shop when I was in school, we had home economics, and you saw that shift. You saw slowly but surely those things leave. Why? It was no longer the directive. The directive was, we want to send people to four-year college. That's the aspiration. But again, it was still economically connected. We were becoming this service-based economy. And so what's happened is, on one end, again, 2024, right? And so more people with college degrees. So in the 80s, you were one of the earlier people, Ajay, probably would like, of the larger group, like, I have a degree. Now there were fewer people with degrees. You automatically stood out. There was more you could do with it simply because people were like, well, you have the degree. That's what we're looking for. We're not asking for much else. We won't talk about how so much training happens on the job anyway, but it was just by nature of like supply and demand. Oh, you have a degree. There's a lot of people with degrees in 2024. The degree itself is not enough. And this is what I mean, where Black people as a narrative, we have to be conscious. Okay, yes, get the degree. But if you're looking at the degree simply as that's the achievement, you're behind. You're in an old narrative of the 80s. You're in my parents told me the same thing. We're in a narrative that doesn't exist anymore without proper counseling. And that's my concern, is that as a community, we're in a narrative without context, economic context.
Wow. That's powerful. I don't want this entire broadcast to go by and we don't shout out your book. I think it's Sister Lawrese, I'm very big on creating what I call liberation templates. Means that if you got something that works for you and you see it's successful, you don't keep it to yourself, you share it with the community. So those of us who write books, do films and stuff like that, those are liberation templates that help our community to get where we are, hopefully, in trying to get. So could you tell us about, I want to get that done right now. Could you tell us about your book? You talk briefly, I'm going to show it on Amazon so people can see it, okay?
Yes. So my book, I Don't Have to Go to College, is a recognition that you do not need to go to a four-year college and secure the degree to be able to participate and get a good job or a family-sustaining wage in today's economy. When you look at where the sectors of growth are, a lot of these jobs are what people call middle skill jobs, or jobs that require an associate's degree or a certification. Now, most people, when you say the three questions I answer in the book, I'll say that before I go to a little bit more about the narrative of the book. But, students, a lot of people on YouTube will say, like, you don't have to go to college, but they don't offer students a guide to say, okay, well, if I don't go to college, what is it that I can do? What's special and unique about I Don't Have to Go to College is it helps students understand, one, what are your interests? So we want to talk about that. Like, what are your options, right? If you don't go to college, what else is there other than a bachelor's degree, associate's degree, et cetera? What are credentials? Two, what are your interests? This is a generation of people, and most people, you want to feel some sort of fulfillment at work. We know we spend a lot of time there. And then three, when you get that entry-level salary, whatever it is in your state, can that salary really meet the cost of living that you need? When you understand that as a student, you're taking on some adult responsibilities. So it's more than just your phone bill, right? Do you want to live by yourself, right? What are insurances you have to take on? If you're going to drive, right? Is your medical care included? It's helping students understand, okay, yes, when you're young, you're like, all right, I worked with students, they're like, oh, we use Crunchyroll, you want to watch Netflix, maybe some anime, maybe go out with my friends. But really, when you take on adult responsibilities, it's far more than that. So 3 aspects of the book. What if you don't go to a four-year college? What are your options? 2, what are your interests? And then 3, once you identify a job that matches your interests, what's that entry-level salary and how much can you do with it?
That you hit it right on the head. I showed you all the book. Go ahead, Lawrese. I'm sorry.
About the book. The book is not, one, it's not boring, right? I mean, like, it's creative, and 2, the book is visually stunning. It's really important for people to understand when people start talking about walking people through step by step, people are like, oh my God, this is going to be boring. I promise you the feedback on the book, if you look at Amazon or when I talk to guidance counselors and people who use the book, the first thing they said is, we love the format. It's easy to follow. And it gave me a step by step to identifying what careers are of interest to me, or for me helping students who are undecided figure out what career direction they would start to go in. So that's something you will be pleasantly surprised by in the book. Is it's not a bunch of text. The text is meaningful, but it's really about a guide, a step-by-step framework, so that you in the book literally asks you got this book because you have to answer the question, if I don't go to a 4-year college, what am I going to do? My promise to you is that by the end of the book, your student, your child, your loved one, even you, if you're trying to change careers, will be able to answer that question.
That's excellent. Now, let me also say this at the outset to those watching. Now, I have 3 college degrees, family. I'm big on education, not so much to prove anything to anybody, but to equip ourselves.
Yes.
So I would be a hypocrite sitting here saying, oh, don't go to college. We're not saying that. We're saying for those of you who say that's not really what I want to do, or I want to move in a different way, then that's fine. We don't want anyone here to feel they have to do this or they have to do that. What the sister's saying is empowering. She's saying we have choice. If you choose to go to college, these are the things you should be looking at. And if you don't choose, there's a whole field of career opportunity that's high paying, good benefits, and you don't need a college degree. So I just want to make sure I say that so no one's thinking like, I just got 3 degrees. He's talking about college ain't important. He's a hypocrite.
I think the same shade. I went to boarding school. I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's in ed leadership, and I'm probably going to continue on and get another master's. So I tell people I'm telling you this because it's health. First of all, we met in an education organization. Education is insular. You got to remember, anybody in education, you're hard pressed to find somebody in education who just has a bachelor's. That's just what anybody in education do. We're that type of industry. So, but I'm saying this truly as somebody who is not only an educator, but who's paying attention to the economy. And that's why I'm going to keep bringing that up. Educators, you ask them, you have to go to school. Well, that's what we did, which is what a lot of people are going to tell you to do, what they did. But when you look at the economy, no, you have options. And I love that you use that word. That's really what it's about. You can go to college and you cannot, and you still can be successful.
Now, speaking of college, having given our disclaimer, we're not saying college is a no-no. We're not saying that, but we do need to know what's going on today. I looked at my old undergrad, and I almost fell on the floor looking at the tuition it is now. What are some of the financial implications of those who want to go to college who may not have money? Is college a lot more expensive? Is it prohibitive now? How would you frame that?
Most people will immediately say college, the cost of it, right, is not even it's increasing even faster than inflation, right? Like it's just this thing that doesn't seem to be tied to anything. It's just going up. So yes, for many people, the tuition itself is cost prohibitive. What I will say beyond that is, I love your question about the financial implications of going to college. So when you look at the top reasons students don't go to college, yes, it's expensive, especially post-COVID. People need to stay home and help their families. Some of it is people really don't know what they want to do with the degree. But to your point, a lot of it is financially tied. It's like, I'm going to go spend this money and I'm not really sure what I want to do with it anyway. Or in general, I can't afford this and I don't feel like I'm getting the type of financial support I need. Now, the reason that this is important and something I outline in the book is that 95% of Black people, Black students who go to college will take out student loan debt. Like we will take out debt to go to college. This is important, right? I took out debt too. So this is important, right? And when I'm not even going into like, this is important because when you can't pay it off, this is like your debt to income ratio and you can't get a house and your credit score. We're not even going to go there. We're not even going to go there yet, right? We're going to stay more short term. We're going to talk about the fact that, so we're taking on a significant amount of debt to go to college. And when they look at the data about how much we still owe, so student loan, they're supposed to be, on average, they're paid off in 20 years. Most people, they try to say that they're structured for 10 years. Most people try, pay them off in 20. But for Black Americans who stayed out student loan debt, we still owe 93% of our debt 20 years after graduation or 20 years after we've enrolled. That's important to know because we are a community that's focused on economics, and we believe just instinctively, I have a degree, I'm going to get an ROI meaning return on that investment. Right? We believe, that $50,000 that I put in every year, I'm going to get a job that's going to give a return. Well, for most people, the return on the 4-year college degree doesn't happen until 20 years into your career anyway. So now we fundamentally don't understand even how somebody gets an ROI. And that's important to note because you're taking out debt. Okay. Even more studies show that, your first job is significant. If you don't, the longer it takes you to get that first job, the less likely you are to get an ROI on your degree. Okay. Black and Latino students are less likely to be counseled around the majors where you get the largest return on degree, things like construction management, right? Even when Black and Latino students pick majors that are more in demand, like computer science, they are more likely to be discriminated against, meaning less likely to find a job, even when they have that comparable credential in that field. And so that's why this is important, because again, there's this idea, oh, I just have my degree. And it does not work like that. Your degree is a piece of the puzzle. The major you choose to have is a piece of the puzzle. Whether or not you have a network is a key piece of the puzzle. And how much money, like how urgent is it for you to get your money back? Because the other thing we don't talk about is that in some families where you do go get the degree and there's this belief you're going to be immediately hired and you're under the pressure of money, then your parents or family or people around you are going to tell, well, we'll just take any job. And then so you're out of the race of a BA level job anyway, because you're just trying to bring in income. It's the same thing that can work against students who are low income or don't have connections. And during the summer, rightfully so, you just like, I'm a babysit, or I'm gonna work at Costco, or I'm gonna go back and work over here. While peers who understand, your counterparts who are wealthier, who understand the game, are racking up internships, because entry-level jobs they find increasingly are jobs that require 3 years of experience, and that experience being those internships that compounds over time, right? There's two types. There really are some fundamentally basic ones, but the kind that really are BA level, they're asking you for some experience in advance. So all that summer, like I have to summarize it because I know I can be functional, but summative, to answer your question, if you believe the degree alone is enough, you're playing a losing game. If somebody says you ROI on the degree, what they're saying is you're spending money that you're supposed to get back. The way you get that money back is by first understanding, are you in a program with a lucrative major that ties to something important in the market, something that's growing? Construction management, healthcare. What they found disproportionately is that Black and Latino students, 33% of all college graduates are going to end up underemployed, not in a job that requires a 4-year college degree. We are disproportionately a part of that 33% because we pick majors that are not lucrative. We pick a lot of the ologies. We pick a lot, which again, it's not to say these things are inherently bad. It's to say you got to connect it to the economy, right? So it's recognizing getting that return on your investment, which right now is like $200,000. I think especially if you're not going to a public university, but you have to consider, what is the major that you're going into? What are well-paying jobs tied to that? Who is your network? Who do you know? Black and Latino students have to have internships in that field, especially if they want to stand out. And the other piece, Ajay, which is interesting, which we can go back to, is social capital. So even the people who released the report said that if you're not integrated into certain networks, it's going to be more difficult for you to get a return on your degree. If you're not integrated in an athletic network, or for people even at HBCUs, if you don't get that exposure, it's going to be challenging for somebody to say, hey, you got a degree, here's an economic opportunity. So I want people to ask themselves those questions. Major is very important. Who do you know? Where can you get an internship? And then that's just the start of how you can get your money back 20 years later.
Excellent. I want to encourage those of you watching to have questions that maybe we can pose to Sister Lawrese while we have her here. I want to thank all of you who are watching live. I have to say, Sister Lawrese, we have a much larger population of people that watch the recorded version. I just did a video 2 days ago, 5,000 viewers, but there was only 9 people on live. So don't be discouraged. Those of you who don't see a lot of people, it's not about all the people watching, right? It's going to grow once we record this. Here's a question for you. So you mentioned the piece about high school, probably when my parents were in high school, very much vocational, very much wood shop and metal shop and all this stuff, and home ec. And now it's different. How do you think, based on what you know, that the high school curriculum itself should change to reflect these new job and career trends?
I don't know where to start with this one because high schools are products of the communities that they're in, and the wealthier communities are already having conversations that we're not having in lower income communities, or people in even rural communities aren't having the conversations that people in more urban or developed communities are having. So some high school curriculums are changing, and changing in a way where they're teaching their students as early as middle school about exploration and interpersonal skills, where they're telling them you have to speak up for yourself and advocate for yourself. And even more importantly, they're telling them we care about you knowing what you want to do. In some communities, in some high schools, the middle schools are now charged with, we need our students to explore themselves. We need our students to start going on field trips to build the confidence and the competence to ask questions, to understand how to build professional relationships. It's already happening in some places. They see how important it is for students to access it earlier, especially because COVID really stunted some students' interpersonal skills, right? Being isolated, not knowing how to express themselves, they recognize, okay, this exploration needs to happen earlier, both interpersonally, but also everybody in general. I will say, in wealthier, affluent communities, less than others, there's still the push for college, and we'll talk about that, right? Because there's a status piece there, and they've saved for it, so it's free, right? Like, or it's not free, but like it's covered. But in our community, it's still disproportionately, especially if we are in, like, I know New Jersey has, they used to be called the Abbott districts. I mean, like, everybody talks about New Jersey's, taxes, but the idea is that we are taxed so that some of that tax money from property taxes can go to certain districts of schools. Like, I'm originally from Newark. It was Newark, Irvington, East Orange, because the idea is that these are higher, there people rent there, and therefore, there's not as much money flowing through the school system. Anecdotally, people talked about the $100 million prize that went to Newark. And again, that didn't see the outcomes that they wanted. But again, I use that to mention understanding of how schools are funded, and using New Jersey as an example, specifically about the disproportionality of, like, if you go to a school in a predominantly low income area, these are schools that are behind because you already have less resources, but then you also got to consider you got resources that you're fighting for different things, right? Coupled with, this could be controversial, PTAs are a secret conduit in affluent neighborhoods to bring money into schools. Our PTAs are not the same way, right? They're not vehicles to bring in, well, we can get this speaker here, or we can fund this activity in this way. And so noting that, because even in low income schools, if it's not on the budget line, if the budget's already tight, if you're up against literacy and numeracy, which were impacted by COVID, if you're up against socio-emotional learning, which we know was impacted by COVID, if you're trying to bring teachers in because you're experiencing a shortage, which was impacted by COVID, but I think also, there's a whole conversation about just the shortage in that industry in certain communities, then, like, where is the priority for career exploration? It's not there. How could it be there, right? That almost feels like a luxury. And so I note that because, again, some high schools you will see, whether they are, and even charter schools, I found to be a little bit more able, because the flexibility to be more progressive in this area. But if you are in certain high schools and they are charter high schools, or they are well funded, you're already finding them doing the curriculum changes in the terms of their counseling teams. Their counseling teams are robust, not just their guidance counselors, but they also have CTE coordinators, workplace coordinators. They have liaisons with businesses. So they're doing the work. They're there. But if you are in a lesser funded high school that has, again, those different areas, SEL they're up against, then you're going to find that it's an afterthought, and someone really has to get that from home, or they have to have a really progressive dean who we're asking to put a lot on, meaning like to go get the funding and to be able to get a certain group of students, or to put that into maybe a couple of classes or touch points for the students. So it's there. But you have to look around at your child's school, and if it's not there, you truly are accountable for giving them that exposure, helping them meet people, putting them in extracurricular environment, saying, hey, this is a trip we're going to go on. Hey, I want you to talk to this person. That's really on us.
Okay, Lawrese, thank you. Again, we're with Sister Lawrese Brown, and she's written a very important book to help. You don't need to go to college, and telling us all these different careers. It's not telling you don't go to college, family. It's not devaluing college. It's saying that you have options beyond college, right? And
Yes.
yes.
Yes. No, I would like to say, this book made me feel like a rebel. And I was like, is it this rational? But it's true. People have to say it over and over again, and that is one thing I will say has been off-putting in our industry. And to a certain extent, sometimes when I have conversations with certain people in our community, any community, you have people who are progressive and people who are less understanding of progressive ideas. But I don't feel like I should have to apologize for making a rational case that says you can be successful without going to college, to a 4-year college. I encourage people, if that's something where and I say this as somebody, as Ajay mentioned to you all, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and man, people have come underneath comments to try to light me up. And then I tell them back, like, I'm looking at the research. And I don't mean that as like, because research can be weird too, y'all. So I'm not saying that as like drop the mic, but I'm telling you, there is the economic argument for people telling students just go to college blindly is not there. And if you come to me with that, I will eat you up in my TikTok. I promise you that. Many times. Like, if you come underneath talking to me about an economy when you went to school, and you went to school in the 80s and 90s and 2000s pre-recession, I will eat you up in my TikTok, and I will give you the statistics related to Black and Latino students, related to majors that are lucrative, and related to where the economy is going. But if you come to me sincerely asking, okay, I'm curious, where did this case come from? What are other opportunities to be successful? Then we're going to have the dialogue.
That's right. That's fair enough. You respond the way people come at you. Now, having said that, I know everybody's itching to want to ask this question. So, based on what you've learned, Lawrese, what are some of the jobs or careers that don't necessarily require a college degree that people should maybe look into?
Absolutely. So instinctively, everyone thinks of trades, and there are trades. We hear about electricians, plumbers, carpenters, etc. My brother in particular, he's a welder. And I will say, one of the highest paying jobs you could ever have is being an underwater welder. Now, there's a couple of skill sets that go into that. And from what I hear, you really got to be comfortable being underwater for a long time. But again, it's a lucrative, specialized position. And that's what I want people to keep in mind. We're talking about skills-based jobs. Sometimes people read the title of the book and they say, oh, just stop at high school. I'm telling no one to stop at high school. I'm telling everybody to take a step beyond it. So I want to say that as the first thing. What I'm going to share with you are jobs that are specialized. That's how you end up getting a family sustaining wage. So we talked about some of the trades. Some of the lesser known trades, though, are also service and tech repair jobs, or service and technician repair jobs. So we think of mechanic and we think of a car mechanic, but we don't often think of an aviation mechanic. We don't even think of the people who fix ships. We don't even think of the people who fix big machines. All of these jobs are in demand and exist. Healthcare is one that's easily overlooked. People just think of doctors. And I know some people will say, oh, a nurse, maybe you get an associate's degree, but it's beyond that. It's a medical sonographer, which is another way of saying the people who do the ultrasound technician. It's the people who do radiation for cancer patients. It's recognizing, there's fitness and physical therapists, those kinds of jobs also. Sports massage therapists do not require a 4-year college degree. When we get into tech and data, we're even talking about cybersecurity, which is growing and in demand, which I'm always surprised because that's big in Florida, but also increasingly in Alabama. I mean, we're all coming into contact with cybersecurity. If you've ever gotten a scam text, somebody ever told you something about Cash App, or you ever felt like your data was leaked and somebody's emailing you who had no business emailing you, that's all cybersecurity. Another thing that's important to note for people who are creative, game design, right? People often overlook that. Even interior design, you don't need a 4-year college degree. And so it's important that we recognize it's not just the trades. There's healthcare, there's service technicians, you can be creative, you can do video editing. There's a range of jobs that are growing that do not require a 4-year college degree. And I'll add this, increasingly, I think you will see more people because of the way technology is shifting things. I think you'll see more people, as you are seeing, drop the 4-year college degree credential, as we're even seeing it for government jobs.
That's very interesting. Hopefully you all are taking notes. Hopefully you all are going to get that book and follow Sister Lawrese even on TikTok. I've seen some of her videos, very interesting. They get right to the point. Now you developed a formula or a way of looking at, I think, maybe if you go to college, how you would decide if you go. I want to show a quick video and maybe you can respond to it.
Yes.
The point of all this is if anybody tells you, oh, just go get a degree or any credential, and then you're guaranteed anything, that is false. There's a formula. And the formula has to do with, one, what is your major or program? And can you map that major or program to a job in the market very clearly? Two, where do you live? And do you have access to the job you want to do near where you live? And I don't just mean is one company hiring. I mean, is that a thriving, growing industry there? And are there multiple companies that could hire you for that job or skill? Three, consider your characteristics. Now, I'm not telling anyone it's hopeless to go into a field based on your physical characteristics or your demographics. No, but I'm telling you to be strategic. Bias exists in the market. And so if you are from an underrepresented group or if you are from a low income group, the best way to increase your chances is to find industries which have a high need for talent, because then you're less likely to experience some of that discrimination because they need talent.
Oh, I love that clip. Thank you.
So how would you, if you were to distill the most important part of that clip for us today, what would you say that is? What did you want to highlight from that?
Can you map your major to a market? Fundamentally, like, we are not in the era of liberal arts. And I went to a liberal arts school, unless you're wealthy. That will always be the caveat, unless you're wealthy. If you're wealthy, do what you want. Take a year off. Your parents got the, are going to slide you into a job anyway. But for everybody else, including myself, map your major to a market. So if you're going to college, and here's I'll do it anecdotally. That's criminal justice is one people talk about a lot. And criminal justice, most people who do that, you're not headed off to be a lawyer. That does not map clearly to any job in the market. That's different than a forensic tech, y'all. You can do, I don't know about y'all, I watch crime shows. Forensic tech, those people who are on the crime, you don't need a 4-year college degree to do that. And so that's what I mean, is that we pick these things that we're like, that don't have any economic value, meaning, and again, I should say it another way, that don't have high demand to give you an economic return that you can live off of. One of the things my dad always said is, he was like, this is America, you need money, right? And so it is recognizing that in America, where we live, money's a currency that we need. And some of the stress comes because we feel like, oh my God, am I going to get enough? And so truly thinking about where you can find something interesting and in a field that's growing. So most simply, whatever you choose to do, is this a job that's growing where you live? Right? There are some jobs, again, cybersecurity, it's growing. Are there cybersecurity organizations and companies in your state and where you live? Can you access them? So that's the other piece. Is this growing where I live? That's the simplest way to think about it.
Excellent, excellent. I wanted to make sure that I include the title of your book and maybe have it scroll down. Hold on 1 second so that people can go cop that. Because I happen to know that we Black folk buy a lot of things, many times from people who despise our very presence. So we can buy those things that are luxury items, they're not necessities, then we should start looking at putting a little piece of our budget, our monthly budget, on educational tools and resources that are, we might see them as luxuries, but in a sense, they're necessities in terms of helping us to maybe build our wealth or build our repertoire. So family, I have it scrolling underneath. The book is entitled, I Don't Have to Go to College, Discover Well-Paying Jobs That Don't Require a 4-year college degree. So Lawrese, let's say that you're now the age you are now, and you were permitted to go in a time machine and go back to the 13, 14-year-old Lawrese. What would you tell the younger Lawrese about college or even career? What generally would be your key speaking points to her?
I have options. I didn't know any other option. But first of all, this is a insight too. College readiness does not start in high school. It starts in middle school because people fundamentally know that the high school you go to determines, not only whether or not you go to college, but the colleges you can get into. So I went to boarding school, and going to college wasn't an option. I mean, it was the only option. And I remember I called my dad and I was like, I don't want to go to college. And he was like, get a job. And I was like, nope. I was like, I will go to college because I will say for 13, 14-year-old Lawrese, I excelled at academic learning. And I want to be specific about that because people tend to think academic learning is this prioritized or it's the best form of intelligence. It's not. It's just specific in school. I have a good memory, so I can recall information easily. I don't mind putting effort into rehearsing, which is what studying is, when you read and write things and you're willing to practice them over and over again. I was comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with even intaking information that has no immediately applied use, which is often what happens in academic learning. I was a strong writer, and early people had identified for me that I did well articulating myself. So academic skills were easy for me. They're instinctive for me. So college was a natural path for me. At the same time, that's not to say that the skill or the ability to articulate myself couldn't have taken me to other avenues, but nobody sat down and explored that with me. So I would say to her, know that academic skills are important, but that's not the only way to be seen as intelligent. I think that would have helped me calm down a little bit too, because I was also one of those kids that cried when my SAT score was not that good. I was very invested in the system. And I would say also recognize you're going to be a student your whole life. And so learn to think about education, not just as formal schooling, but about the people that you learn from and the experiences you're willing to take on so that you can continue to advance.
Yes, very good. The informal education.
Yes.
That doesn't occur in the classroom. I tell people all the time, I maybe got a $1 million white boy education, but I got $1 billion Black community education from grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles, the neighborhood book vendor, and people in the neighborhood who educated me in ways that the college classroom could not. So I'm glad that you said that.
And can I add a point? So my mother was a special education teacher in Newark for 30 years. And I think she understood intimately, and still does, things that also I didn't understand about the school as a system. And I know people are like, what is the system? And it makes it abstract. Y'all, we exist in the media is a system, the healthcare is a system, education is a system, law enforcement is a system. A system is anything organized that people are organized and have policies in place for an outcome. And guess what? The system doesn't move itself. People move the system. People create the policies. People make the choices. So when people say the system, right, you do got to think about historically what's the root of a policy, but also what people are making the decisions. And having my mother as a special education teacher was great as I learned more about education, to really give context to how people think in the system and to really understand. She was excellent at shepherding us early, especially as students in Newark, to different opportunities where we could actually get some of the benefits that aren't instinctive sometimes when you grow up in places like Newark, right? Simply because the resources are less scarce or less available for those schools. So I will say that I want to note that as a way that shaped my understanding of education, but also as a shout out, I think when you have a mother that is a teacher, you do get a different understanding of education in general and what it takes for somebody to do a job that's increasingly important, but also increasingly hard to find people willing to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking, you mentioned your mother, I was thinking about my dad and all the lengths that this man went through to make sure that I got into college and started right after high school. He rented a car, he found out about the HEOP program and called the lady there and set up an interview, and we drove all the way to Syracuse, and it was a big deal to him, and I couldn't, at the time, I didn't really appreciate why this was such a big deal for him. But when I learned more of his story, he felt that the public school system had betrayed him, that he graduated, he was an excellent basketball player. So he felt that the school kind of pushed him out, he didn't have to go to class, he said. I mean, that's ridiculous. And he got good grades because he played ball. And then when he graduated, he had to really work on literacy.
Yes.
I think sometimes we live vicariously through our children, right? Yes. So we might feel like, I got jerked. I don't like what the system did, so I want to make sure my kid gets it. And that's not necessarily bad, but those watching, just make sure you channel that in the right way. maybe you don't want your kid to do what you didn't get to do, but you want to empower them so that maybe they're more empowered than you, because
Yes.
that could sometimes skew the way that they develop. What would you say about that?
Absolutely. The education system, not education, meaning education as a vehicle or different programs we go through to learn, to improve ourselves or achieve an outcome, is critical to success in life. Like, we are always learning, but the education system, I mean, the way it's organized in schools, that's a specific experience. I'm fortunate in that my mother, as a special education teacher, and the people who rallied around me were like, Lawrese is smart. She needs to be challenged. They would always tell my parents that. At the same time, I'm one of 6, and so my mother had a range of experiences where she also had to advocate for her children in different ways. Where my mother taught us all to read, but if you were around a teacher that didn't necessarily see you as valuable, as sometimes happened to my brothers one time, my mother had to advocate for my brother and say, no, my brother can compete in these classes. Like, my son can stay in these classes. It also is important to note that sometimes when we don't like school, like I tell people, I like school. I understand now the conversation about what is school for. That's different, goes different directions, but I like school. I could do it. I excelled at it. Some people do not like school because it's not applied. And that doesn't make somebody intellectually inferior or stupid. It really means that, like, they need to find a form of education that's more tactical and hands-on, and academic learning is not that. But that doesn't mean that if you don't like school, that you shouldn't give your child a chance to like it, or support them as much as you can with the homework that they have to do to excel at it. And that's what I mean. Like, sometimes we all come with these blocks where we had an experience and then we just think other people had an experience. And even more specifically, I will say this. One of the experiences I had to come to is girls experience education, school-based education, very differently than young boys. And that took me a minute. Of course, it took me a minute, right? I'm a girl, I'm a woman. So I was thinking from my own perspective. I was like, oh, school. And then I read this book called In the Minds of Boys. And disproportionately, I mean, y'all, the school system is not, school structure is not set up for young boys to advance. It requires a compliance. Even my mother said it. My mother had 4 girls and 2 boys. She was like, if I told y'all to sit down, y'all sit down. She's like, my sons came, and I was like, whoa. It really requires a compliance. It requires an obedience. And it's not to say that young men aren't disciplined. It's to say the type of learning is very input-output for young boys with their testosterone, who have a lot of energy, who probably need to learn in short bursts and then go take a break and then come back, or who would benefit from seeing a man who would discipline them more, who understands that the way a young man needs to be disciplined, versus saying, how many times do I have to tell you, maybe sometimes as a young woman, when women can be more compliant with discipline. So I note that too. I'm glad you asked that question, is we do have to understand what kind of processes support certain groups better than others, and not use that as both as an excuse, but as an understanding of, like, no, you really are within a system where, like, young boys are more likely to be seen as behavioral problems. They're more likely to be put in some special ed. They're more likely to have to, like, be suspended and miss those days of school. Like, why is that? They've shown certain things that, like, do young boys benefit from starting kindergarten later? Yes, because it takes young boys longer to mature. So of course there's things that can be done, but I mentioned that to say the school system, academic learning is specific. Don't pay attention if somebody's not excelling in it. Don't make that an immediate not, oh, you're never going to be anything. That's not what that means. Like, really investigate the type of learning that they need so that they can get better experiences, so they can get the outcome they want.
Yes. There's my lovely queen, who's actually very close to me right now at this moment, put up a comment, Lawrese. I'm trying to show it because I think it's very inspiring. It speaks to that your message is very inspiring. I'm trying to find it. Give me one. So yes, right here. We have a large segment of people who feel ashamed because they don't go, they don't perform well in or desire to go to college, or don't go to college, and that this message is liberating for them. And I would agree with that, particularly in our community. Having been a classroom teacher for a few decades, talking to parents, and they cry, and why are you crying? Because so and so is going to college, I didn't get to go. I feel so. Like, don't feel bad.
Right.
Most people in this country don't have a college
I have
degree,
a college degree.
irrespective of race, right? So don't get too caught up, but it means a lot to our community. And so to have someone like you say, listen, if you go, great. But if you go, have a goal, be strategic about going. And if you don't go, there's a wealth of opportunities for you. It's very empowering. So we definitely do. I echo her sentiment on that. We definitely want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, and I'm so glad Brenda noted this because we do discriminate against people who don't have degrees. So it's not, I want people, if you did not go to college, please, you're not making it up. Somebody shaded you, somebody presented it as they were better. And that's one of the things I wrote about in the book, in the preface. A four-year college degree wasn't as much about the economy as it was about respectability and me being able to say, like, this shows my value as a person. Like all the good attributes, when you look, or even the way we study, we attribute so much goodness to people because they got a degree. And we don't really give them complaint. We're like, oh, you got a degree. You must come from a good family. You must be well disciplined. You must be smart. And then if you don't, the other end, you experience unfavorable discrimination. Well, what happened to you? Why didn't you go to college? Why didn't you? Especially, for the younger group. I think they're more, the reason why this book is timely is they're more open. But absolutely, I'm glad you noted that. And I do want to participate in the shifting of that stigma. It is ridiculous that we attribute all these things, these unfavorable attributes to somebody simply because they didn't go to a four-year college without actually investigating what actually makes someone successfully able to complete college in the first place. And so I do hope people feel liberated. And I hope people know that your value, just like I'm not better than anybody because me and IJ, we're not better than anybody because we got degrees. Nobody's worse as a person. You still are a good person, can be a good person if you don't have a four-year college degree. And more importantly, you can be economically successful, if not more than some of us who decided to take on all this debt and then not actually get a well-paying job. Okay. Thank you.
That's right. That is right. So the Queen says, family, this is a must-share message. Share this video. Support our sister by purchasing her book, High-Paying Jobs That Don't Require a Four-Year College Degree. We have it scrolling on the bottom. It's very important. I'm going to reemphasize the need for us to budget. First of all, to have a budget. Let me say that, with your time and your money. And secondly, monetarily, you should have a little bit of budget. I'm going to take this little bit every month. I'm going to get a book with this money. Not an erotic book, not a street fiction book,
not ever.
A book that's teaching you a skill or a mentality or a temperament that can help you and your family get ahead. That's very important. People who are empowered invest in such things. They see that as breathing and eating. It's a necessity.
Yes. And Ajay, I'm glad you know that too, because one of the things that, and I'll say lower income and not to use that as this blanket or abstract term. I say it as, recognizing in a capitalist economy, again, the economist, the labor economist hat on, the biggest market failure is information. And I want to put this in a context so people are like, what is Lawrese talking about? Because that's not, like, really think about it. Let's use AI as an example. Right now, we have to figure out AI. It's here. But guess who are the people that know most about AI? Well, of course, the government has to study it. This is AI. Of course, people at businesses have to study it. The Fortune 500 companies are studying it. So these people already have the information, and these people are disproportionately white. And so what they're doing, and disproportionately affluent, right? Because that's how they pick these industries. And so they're passing this information down to their children so that their children can learn it and have an advantage and understand it, and they will be able to maintain the status. So I mentioned that to say, when we're low income, sometimes we don't understand the power of information, because information, it's how you make decisions. So imagine if you knew, okay, if I need to, AI is coming down. They're saying that the most important thing I need to study when it comes to AI is this profession. How does that change you? And so I mentioned that, Ajay, to say to your point, like books or even ways of capturing information is critical for advancement, especially the kind of economic advancement that we're looking for. The unfortunate part about it is we gatekeep information on purpose, and certain groups gatekeep the information because information itself is the advantage. And unfortunately, we're not in some of those spaces, enough of us in those spaces where it trickles down, or where it's actively given our community, it's trickled down and it's like, oh, too late, you missed the bubble. And a lot of capitalism and getting quick and getting returns, I mean, quick, did you get in early? So I just wanted to
Mhm.
know that to your
Mhm.
point about the significance of information and looking for it, getting access to it, and then when you get good information, figuring out how best to leverage it for your gain.
Yeah, and I want to add this because it's right in tune with what we're talking about. There are jobs I understand. I don't know a lot about it that require people with expertise in different areas to simply hook up with these artificial intelligence programs to teach them so they learn. So somebody may have an expertise in history, political science, whatever it is that's liberal arts or whatever, and they can get a job feeding information to, I don't know if it's a computer program, I don't know how it works, but that's interesting to know. So AI is providing, it's going to take jobs away. That's a fact. But it's also going to produce new jobs, you know?
Absolutely. And make us more skilled in our ability to work with it to do our jobs. And again, that's another way to remain competitive is to understand it. I mean, there's going to be, like you said, it's economic. And that's what I want everybody to come back to. And you don't have to think of economics as like, even if you don't understand um, inflation and sometimes what the Federal Reserve was and why we are increasing interest rates, that's okay. Really, in the book, we talk about supply and demand. Like, you want to be paid more? Where's a low supply of workers, but a high demand for workers? Like, high demand because there's a lot of people who need to do the job, but a low supply of people who actually can do it. You're going to get paid more. So it's just that fundamental and paying attention to where is the growth. And if that's the one question everybody leaves here and asks themselves, where is the growth happening in an industry near me? Where is the growth? What are people talking about as something that's going to be important to different industries, right? And again, we think health industry, education industry, right? A sector of people designed to do like a sector of companies that all have the same focus and output, but like where that would be a great question for everybody to investigate with themselves or with their children. Like, where's the growth? And again, you can use your own family, like boomers. Y'all, boomers, everybody got out boomer. There's a lot of boomers, right? Like, so, but instinctive level, what does that mean? Boomers are aging. We don't have enough people in the healthcare system to support them. Sure, it could look like, okay, more people in nursing homes, home health aides, but it's also just going to look like they need support. We're not really prepared for that as an economy, right? Like so it's also these things. Oh, it's like childcare. We haven't figured that out. Oh my God. Okay. Maybe if you even want to start a bit, what can I do in my community around childcare? This is a big, important problem. When I look around, there's not affordable. Is there a way I can set like that? We don't have to make it abstract out there. Follow the economists. I promise if you look around, you will find an understanding like AI or why suddenly now when I go into McDonald's or any store, everything look like a counter, look like they got 2-3 workers. What does that mean? Right? Like, who are the people who make those self-checkout machines? Like, let me figure out if I can do that. Oh, iPhones, they keep integrating all their systems. Who are the micro welders that make or fix these phones? Like, I promise you, if you just start to ask questions about the world around you, you will say like, ooh, that's a job that needs fixing. That's a job I didn't even realize. That's growing. That's something important. That's something interesting to me. And I think you'll find that that's the best way even to think about any job you want to do. What's just interesting to you.
It's definitely, this whole conversation is very interesting and very relevant. Everyone's looking for the get rich quick scheme, and maybe it's right in front of our eyes. Maybe the thing that will break the generational curse of poverty or financial instability is simply looking in your community or out other communities and figuring out what is the need that is not being met. Where is there a void that I
Oh,
can fill?
yes, Ajay, can I add to this? Because this is one
Please.
where I'm like, what they found is that where most Black wealth is, speaking of boomers, it's in their pension, right? It's in the older people's pensions. Now, this is important because certain jobs today, you don't know. You're like, I don't know if I got a health care. I don't know if I got a pension. I don't even if I got it. I don't know if I want to invest in those things, right? So a lot of they found that the most where most Black wealth was compounded is in pensions. Now, I'm noting this because when you talk about breaking generational curses, we like to look at the one. We're like, who's the one person? I would tell Black people, I would tell anybody who's low income, it is not the one. It is
Yeah,
the
that's
many.
right. That's right.
Because what happens is that's another narrative that we also put on the 4-year college degree. You go to college, you get this job, you'll get the salary or the opportunities that can help our family. No, No, that's not how that works, especially because most of the payoff, like I said, is going to come 20 years down the line, 10 if you're lucky. It will come only really early if you really went through those programs to go into like a Fortune 500 company almost immediately, right? Where you get like a 70, 80, $90,000 salary. And then, but most people don't end up with that. So going back to your point, one of the things I see that's also beneficial about breaking generational poverty is you can go through a certification program in a year. You can get a program that's done in 3 months, because the idea isn't that you need to figure it out overnight, but what can you do in a 3-month spurt? What kind of training can you get in 6 months? What kind of training, if you have the space, can you get in a year so that you can work immediately? Or even if you're a student, if you don't know what you want to do, I don't see why you would go to a 4-year college, because 4-year colleges are not exploratory. I tell people that there is little about 4-year colleges where you're going to go and you're going to be like, oh, wow, I'm doing enough where I have figured out what I want to do. I would say start with something that's of interest to you. Take a shorter program, 3-6 months, maybe a year, do the work. And guess what? Most people who are going to graduate, you're going to be with your family. You probably till you're 30, which doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's really just the way cost of living has gone. So you don't have the overhead. So if you're like, you work it for a year or two and you're like, this is terrible, guess what? And you have a lower cost of living, like stack your money and figure out something else you want to do, whether it's starting a business or whether it's going to school for something else. That is where the future of education is headed. And that's, again, also this stark shift from where there was a milestone, right? Where it was like, where everything was like, okay, well, I went to high school and then I went to college. And then, now I'm in the workforce. Now I'm a manager. Now I'm going to start a family. Now I'm going to get the house. Now I'm going to do some more work. But I'm going to stay at this job, if not 30 years, maybe 20 years, 10 years. I think I had somebody from Gen X one time say you should stay at a job at least 4 to 5 years. We are not in that type of economy. And anybody who's telling you that is selling you a narrative that is outdated. We are truly in the type of economy. Things are moving quickly. Technology is changing. Businesses we saw over 2023 to 2024, these industries we thought were stalwarts meaning things we thought would never change, finance, tech, entertainment, all go through these permanent reductions in headcounts. It's a different world. And so part of being in a different world is we move quicker. And that's what I would say to people too, like intergenerational power, move quick as a family, get a skill. And that's the way, because then everybody's moving up instead of you realizing you're trying to get off of one salary and then you're saying, okay, this one salary is going to bring people up. Everybody go up. You're going to get more out of that and use this shifting economy as an opportunity to participate in that.
Yes, I'm with that, Sister Lawrese. Also, we're coming to the close. Can we end with the importance of, in addition to what we've said today, financial literacy?
Yeah. There's a budget in the last page of the book. One thing they will say, Ajay, and I'm curious if your parents talk to you about this, is a lot of people will say, or maybe I will say a lot of low income people will say, and I think I would put myself in the category. I'm not sure if my parents talked to me. No, they didn't. I'm gonna say that. My parents did not talk to me about the extent of their expenses that they had as adults. That's something you kind of stumble through on their own. They really didn't say this is how much for the mortgage, or you want to consider your insurance, or this is health insurance, or what, this is car, and then ooh, this is our car insurance, or ooh, I got y'all a phone bill, and then what, there's also telecommunications, or like what, there's life insurance, or what, like we didn't get the full weight of all they were carrying. So of course, I do remember my mom was like, she was like, with your first paycheck, you're just so excited. It seems like so much. Like, I'm going to blow it. Right? Like, but I will say this, a key piece of financial literacy is people being aware of like this cost. And you spend a lot of childhood, if you're blessed, if you don't, and I worked relatively early too. I worked during college, not understanding you're getting access to things you need, but somebody else is paying for it. And so I would say having that conversation where people truly understand like, this cost. In the book, I say this, what is it you can take on? Because that's what we're all looking for, some form of independence, but true independence is financial. So what kind of expenses are you willing to take on? Are you willing to take on that car expense? Well, not just the car, that's going to come along with the gas, and that's going to come along with the insurance. Are you willing to live by yourself? This is even where the conversation of renting versus getting a house is coming up for a lot of people, because it's like, well, if I get the house, I'm the landlord. If that ceiling falls down, I got to fix it. But if I'm in an apartment, like somebody else can go do that, right? And so I would encourage everyone to have those conversations in a concrete form earlier. And we do that in the book. We've outlined all those categories. So you don't have to think about it off the top of your head. You can say, this is how much we pay for this. If you get this job, can you take this on? Or if you want to be independent, can you take this on? It really is important for us to think about what does it fully mean to be independent, and just think about what expenses we care about versus ones where we're like, actually, I don't need that. I don't want that.
Mhm.
I would say that. Concrete
That's a
expenses,
good point.
income.
Good point. Young people just everything's taken care of for them. So now they're thrust into this world. They want to be grown. We all were there,
Yes.
but they don't have the skills to be grown.
And then we
Right?
want,
They don't have the understanding.
yes, then we want y'all to fix it. We're like, yes.
Right. Right. Yeah, I would say the organization that we both formerly worked for was one thing I appreciated was they rolled out a curriculum of financial literacy, and so I'm teaching it in these 3 different high schools, and to see the faces of the teachers, their actual permanent teachers that work there, who didn't know what percentage they should put down when they get a car.
Yes.
Who didn't know what percentage they should have saved up when they get a house. Who didn't know that they should always have a monthly budget. Always. Yes. And these were the adults there. So that let me know, like, wow, this financial literacy, and by the way, New York State does not mandate that it be taught. So a lot of states don't even mandate this. So these things have to be like you've done, Lawrese. We have to teach. We have to bring that to these communities because the schools may not give it to them.
No. And then also recognize that one of the things you learn as a researcher in life is these conversations bring up shame. Money brings up shame for people. And the way people talk about it, if you're not a millionaire, you should listen, there are resources that have been democratized. By democratized, I mean the gatekeepers are gone, right? If you want to make a song, you can go put it up now on Apple or Spotify. You and I are having this conversation on YouTube that can be broadcasted. We don't need to be on Good Morning America, right? Like we can meet people where they are. At the same time, it's a recognition that certain things carry certain messages, whether it's like you have to go to college to be successful. They put us in a position of shame, or this idea that there's a million ways to make money. Sure, there's different ways to make money, but really understand if you don't have that money yet, that's I don't want you to feel ashamed. I would encourage you, instead of feeling ashamed about it, to really understand it's likely you lack the information about the economy, or the understanding even about business models. That's going to help you more, instead of shaming yourself and being like, why was I born in this position, or why, really understand you're missing information. That's it. And you're missing understanding of yourself and what you excel at, but also business models. That is a more helpful way to think about change than for you to spend time shaming yourself because somebody else on YouTube said you should know better. You will get better as long as you, like you said, educate yourself.
That's right, Sister Lawrese. Don't beat yourself up, family. That's demoralizing. You have to empower yourself. Always think of, does this decision, this frame of thought push me ahead, or does it paralyze me or stigmatize me? So I would completely agree. I think we're at the close, Sister Lawrese. We want to thank you for some very good information. People have said in the broadcast that we have to do a part 2, and certainly I'm open to that. Hopefully we can get in touch with you and bring you back. Very important information. We want to remind people we have a ticker on the bottom that is promoting Lawrese's book. We want you to go to Amazon as soon as the broadcast is over and buy the book if you can. See it as an investment. See it as rent. See it as utility. It's right up there in importance to get the knowledge we need to advance ourselves and get out of this woe is me, I wish I did this. We don't have to be there.
That's
right. With the right information and discipline and action, we can get out of that ditch. So we thank you, Lawrese. Feel free to stay in touch. We're going to stay in touch with you. We're going to keep promoting the book. And thank you again for the very important information. Are there any last words you have for those watching?
This is the land of opportunity. And one of the things I want to say, that's why it was important for me to write this book too, is there's opportunity here and we deserve to know about where the opportunities are and take advantage of it. We are skilled in many different ways. We are the original creators of architecture and so many different things that exist. I would say, let's not limit ourselves. There is no one way to be successful, and let's really empower ourselves to find the best way for us to be successful individually and as a community. And that's truly understand the economy and participating in ways that it is growing. So I look forward to all the ways everyone listening to this broadcast and beyond will be successful in identifying not only what they want to do, but in recognizing by doing that and paying attention to what's growing, we are going to change the legacy of our families and ultimately our community by putting on, like you said, that thinking. A different thinking about the economy, not just respectability.
That's right. And on that note, you know what I'm going to say, family. I'm going to say to Black people in particular, if we get correct and accurate information, if we empower ourselves in every way possible, if we believe in ourselves, if we get rid of the toxic people and vibrations that surround us, and we organize with discipline, we will win. Thank y'all, family. Peace and Black power. Have a beautiful day.